It's supper time with Meat and Potatoes, a podcast by Embrace where your journey is our journey.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome again back to another episode of Meat and Potatoes, where we address the topics of new Muslims and new revert Muslims. Today I'm surrounded by two wonderful brothers representing the East and the West Coast, Brother Abdul Rashid and Brother Rashid bin Qadir. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my brothers. Thank you for joining.
Wa alaikum
Walaikum
assalam
assalam
warahmatullahi.
warahmatullahi
It's
wabarakatuh.
good to be here again with you brothers.
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. So today we are without Brother Kenneth. And of course we miss him in spirit. We miss his presence here. But there's a topic or a discussion in which we're talking about today that he's not involving himself with here because shameless plug here. Brother Kenneth is not quite married yet. So if there's anyone interested, alhamdulillah, send us some love notes in our emails. But beyond that, today we wanted to talk about a topic that is not necessarily an issue, but it is something worthy of discussion or something worthy of discussing about regarding the being a revert or being a new Muslim. And that is regarding marriage challenges. So there are some challenges or some common situations that may come up after a revert Muslim or someone who reverts to Islam may face after their reversion that they will have regarding their marriage. And then we're also wanting to talk about some practical tips on how to keep a marriage strong or some advice regarding those challenges that may get posted up here. But to open up the floor regarding this here, I do have to mention that for myself, I'm going to be drawing a lot of information from Abdul Rashid and Brother Rashid regarding their experiences because they are much older, they are much wiser, they have more experience, and they have longer lasting marriages than what I have. I now have a good, stable, happy, comfortable marriage at this point here. So I have a little bit to share, but nothing, too not as much as the other brothers here. But I'm going to pose around a whole bunch of questions and whatnot, and open up this discussion for this here. So without further ado, I want to pass the the appetizer around first to Brother Abdul Rashid, and get a little bit of background. If you could share about himself, his marriage, how long he's been married, his wonderful family that he can share with for the podcast here. Bismillah, Brother Abdul Rashid. Please give us some background.
Sure. Bismillah. So I've been married to my lovely wife for over 20 years.
MashaAllah.
We have three kids. I have my son who's 18. He's in his first year of college. And I have two daughters, 13 and 11, I think. MashaAllah. So quickly, I took my shahada, and like less than a year later, my wife and I got married because we were already engaged at the time. And in full disclosure, I didn't know anything about proper Islamic marriage other than the fact that I knew I could marry a non-Muslim, which was the most important thing at the time when we got married. And so we got married. And it wasn't until like recently, the last few years, that from talking to other people and reading, there's real rules behind getting married Islamically, from the dowry to all different rules and all of the different rituals, whatever. I still haven't been to a real Islamic wedding yet. I've been invited to two, but I couldn't go for whatever reason. So I've never really been to an experience how it actually goes down. But but nevertheless, so there were really no issue at the time when we got married because I just started practicing religion, but I knew nothing. I mean, literally, I don't know anything now, but I really knew nothing then. So it was all, learning on the fly, and, but I just, like I said, I knew that it was okay for us to get married. And it wasn't, then, as you guys know, part of my story is that, in my travels and living life, I struggled being a consistent practicing Muslim. So it wasn't until a few years ago, I got back on the deen and started really, really practicing. And so still no issues because my wife's my wife. Nothing really changed. My wife's very good about, and my kids are very good about honoring my religious obligations and helping me do what I need to do to be a better Muslim. Um, so for me, the biggest issue is just, or my biggest issue with is one, my family isn't Muslim, so I'm trying to do in-house dawah to bring them to the fold of Islam. And then the other biggest issue, and I'm probably they'll tell you too, is that time. Like I'm trying to thin my time out or spread my time out between my wife, my family, my home responsibilities, as well as my religious obligations. And that's my biggest challenge right now, because sometimes I know I go too far to one extreme or the other, trying to keep that middle path. But so that's my story, and those are my issues, if you want to call them issues. So that's my thing, and I can answer any questions after that if you have any.
Absolutely.
Inshallah.
And I think we'll call them topics of discussion, because I think they're going to be valuable for those who are going to be viewing this podcast, or listening to it, that they want to hear, what are those sorts of challenges? How do you work through those sorts of challenges? What's the agreement that you may come across with your wife or with your family members to, create cohesion inside of the household? And, maybe they are, those who are, listening in, they may not have those sorts of challenges, or they're interested to know, what is the methodology to, again, create a cure for something or make it easy, so that everyone is happy. Alhamdulillah.
No.
We'll definitely come back to those topics here, and we'll pass the baton, if you will, or the dinner plate, or the fork and knife to Brother Rashid bin Qaldir. Yeah, give us a little bit of background of yourself, your marriage, or what you have to bring to the table. Bismillah.
Bismillah. Shalom Ta'ala, and I appreciate handing that fork and knife, Shalom Ta'ala.
Mashallah.
Let's see. As far as history is concerned, so I did get married. My first marriage, I've had a few marriages in life, so I got a little bit of history there, more than I want. But alhamdulillah, it is, Allah's the best of planners. My first marriage was before I really took Shahada. So my dad, I grew up Muslim, but I took my Shahada in 1998. But before that is when I got married and had my sons. So I had that marriage, and then that ended up coming into divorce. But then I got married again after I took Shahada. So I went through that experience of having an Islamic marriage and going through all of those and going through the rituals and surviving or going through that marriage as well. And when looking at marriage, I know one of the things that we were going to discuss today were challenges after marriage. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us what may be good, what may be bad for us, what we look as, and please correct me for getting this hadith if I don't word it exactly, but for those things that seem like they're bad for us are actually good, and those things that are actually good for us may be bad. So I kind of leaned into that hadith a little bit when I start to think about marriage, because sometimes we bump into things that our spouse may do, which actually may bother us. It may get on our nerves and concern us, but that is actually a good thing for us. It could be a test, it could be a trial, it could be whatever it is, but maybe all the time what seems bad is actually good for us. And certain things that are actually good may be bad. And we will hope that there's very, very little of that going on in any relationship. But I think that some of the challenges that we can bump into as Muslims are some of the challenges that any traditional relationship can bump into, and that being money, communication, and trust. And those are three big, huge things. When it comes to money, we are supposed to, as men, we are this maintainers and protectors of our women. So, sometimes us men may fall short in that space, and sometimes women may expect more than what their rights actually say they should get. We're not scholars and we're not sheikhs, so I don't want to get down the fiqh rules of all of that. But sometimes that's something that we need to be careful with. And then communication, how we as men are communicating with our spouses, because the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was the best of men, the best of husbands to his wives, and the best of fathers, a best of a father to his children. And so we should lean into or learn more about how he communicated with his wives. They may have been short with him at times or upset with him at times, but he didn't blow up. He didn't lose his composure. He stayed and had an even kill when it comes to communication with his wives. And then trust. And that is a huge one. That is a huge one, especially as we get older, because sometimes, whether it's the man or the woman, can have an experience. They have a past. They have things they've gone through, and that can cause them to trust or not trust certain people with certain things. And we need to be aware of that. That's when it becomes very important to know your spouse. So when you see that what you think may be or you feel may be a lack of trust going on, so that you can actually effectively communicate through those situations. But those three things, those are like the three huge things I think folks can bump into after they after they become married. Allah knows best, and he's the best of planners.
Alhamdulillah. And again, too, a lot of excellent topics to discuss about, because these are real and relevant things that happen after, well, during the time of marriage, after the time that marriage happens. And to kind of disclose for myself, so we talked about the topic of divorce, but sometimes that is the reality, and sometimes we call it sometimes relative baggage that comes with us. But for myself, I had been Islamically divorced twice before I had met my current wife, and of course I bring that along with me. And one of the things that, as you were mentioning, Brother Rashid, is that expectations that we have inside of the marriage, kind of going forward, whether it's what is the requirement for the man to give to the woman, or sometimes it's that means of communication. What is the each person bringing to the table, or in the same sense, what baggage may they be bringing? Is sometimes it is that openness that is. Sometimes you have to be blunt, sometimes you have to be honest, sometimes you have to be sincere and clear, because that is only going to allow that next marriage, since you're sharing that with somebody, that's what your goal is, that you bring that open to the table so that your next marriage is going to be successful, and hopefully not, if there were pitfalls or issues that happened in the previous one, they don't bring the same exact issues from that one into the next one, and perpetuate this over and over again. And and as you were saying, we're not scholars and we're not marriage counselors or anyone of that sort, but it's just relative speaking. Be wise with your decisions and how you're setting yourself up, and hopefully you're planting these seeds that will eventually, sprout to success in a wonderful family that will be successful. But with that, I think we opened up ourselves to a lot of excellent points of discussion for for us to start off our discussion with. Some of the topics again were regarding the male establishment inside of the household, or what is our expectations regarding being a man inside of the household. Brother Abdul Rashid, do you want to comment or mention anything regarding that? How those, living up to those expectations.
So when me and my wife we talked about this, my wife and I, before, but I think because we had similar backgrounds, single parent held run households and the whatnot, and not seeing, as a kid, not seeing many traditional marriages, whether they were Islamic or not. So I think we had either leveled or lowered expectations, or maybe even no expectations. We just knew we wanted to be married. And I knew when discussing marriage with my wife, I was like, we're going to do this. In my mind, it's going to be forever, because I didn't want to have any, all these kids out in the world and they not know me or I not know them because because my upbringing, because I didn't know I know who my father is or was, but I didn't know him. He definitely didn't know me. And I didn't want to do that to my kids if we had kids. And we got married and we didn't have our son until after 7 years. We dated for 7 years. That's not, and then 7 years after we got married, then we had our first kid. So we were pretty cautious, I guess. Because I think during that time I was always thinking I didn't want to be like my dad, right? And and at some point I was like, you know what, I'm not going to be him. That's his problem. Those are his issues. Now I need to live my life and do what I want to do. And of course, I wanted to have kids. I changed my mind and said I want to have kids, and we decided we wanted to have kids, and we did that. But my point is, we didn't have like real life examples to draw from to create expectations. Our expectations were pretty low. We just wanted to love each other, create a home, create a safe environment for the kids we were going to have, and that was it. And I think even now, 20 some odd years later, and 3 years into it, I think we're doing pretty good.
Alhamdulillah.
So I think you should have some sort of expectations, but they should be agreed upon expectations of how you're going to work this thing out and what's the focus. And I know I'm not talking about an Islamic marriage. I'm talking just the marriage in general, which are pretty much the same things. But yeah, there needs to be communication. Everybody needs to know their role, I guess, so to speak. And of course that can be fluid. Like when you first get married, your role is going to be different than it was when you start making more money and then you buy a house and you always think the kids going. But yeah, there needs to be some sort of expectations between the two partners, the man and the woman, and they should be clear on what those are, and they should be agreed upon expectations as well.
Absolutely, that openness to so that discussion is had beforehand, which was always my understanding is that when that's supposed to happen is, I mean it is usually before the marriage, but sometimes you can't expect the unexpected. You don't know what's going to happen. As you were mentioning, when you start buying a house, when you start having kids, sometimes you'll move to a different place. Jobs will change, situations will change, health will change, whatever the case may be. That open line of communication that you're going to have with that person, or sometimes knowing those personality quirks, if you will, of the person that you are with is going to be sometimes the make it or break it situations, or knowing how you're going to assess that situation and make the best out of that situation, depending on who your partner, who your spouse is. And you yourself are going to know who your spouse is, growing and living with them. How do you bring up a certain topic with them? How do you bring up a topic of money? How do you bring a topic of we need to buckle down, or hey, we have some extra money, let's do this, let's do that, whatever the case may be. It does take an active interaction with that person, and that intimacy that you have with that person, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts that softness in all of us, so that we can be confide and share and be like a cover to one another, to be able to feel comfort like that with one another. But if we stray away from doing that, it opens the means for tension and can cause some disdain. And usually, money, communication, and children are usually the main reasons as to why a marriage, whether it's Islamic or not, winds up failing nowadays. And I'm sorry, Brother Rashid, you were mentioning something before I interrupted you here.
Oh, no, I was going to say real quickly that I completely agree with Brother Abdul Rashid said, and especially when it comes to the area of expectations, because one thing in Islam is that we don't date, right? Unlike non-Muslims, or I'll just say with my first marriage, we met each other, we lived together first, and we did that for a couple of years, and then we got married. Well, within Islam, we don't necessarily date, or we try not to as much as possible. And no one is perfect. And if we fall into that, and that happens,
Sorry,
alhamdulillah,
but there is a courting process. We won't call it dating, but there's a time where you guys got to get to know each other so you can figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So it's like
Yeah,
that's like
I
dating,
was
but not.
gonna
Yeah,
get.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
I was
sorry.
gonna get into that. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but yeah. So we don't have a dating phase where we're actually dating and living together and all of that. But as Brother Abdul Rashid said, there is a courting period. So before marriage is when we meet with the wali, our guardian, and that's when we sit down and we try to talk about as much as humanly possible. And so, like when it comes, I'll just say money, right? So there's certain rights that the sister has, and there's certain rights that a brother has. So during that premarital part with your wali and other people that are involved, it's really good to sit down and talk about money, and trust and communication and how you're going to handle children and how all of those things are going to go. So if we can meet during that period to talk about that particular expectation and how we're going to handle that, then inshallah ta'ala, once we get into marriage, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with. And during that courting period, like I said, just really understanding what your rights are. Get a really, really solid, clear understanding of what your rights are and what your spouse's rights are, so that once you do get married, it's going to be a lot easier to communicate through those things. Because I'll admit, I ran into some situations where I didn't. My communication was very poor before marriage, and then during that courting period, and then once we bumped into it while married, it was hard. It was very difficult to get through. And I'm thinking, wow, if we had talked about that beforehand, this might have been a lot easier. So that would be my advice to those people who are thinking about marriage right now.
Alhamdulillah. I think my experiences through marriage is that you do become a better communicator, but it also opens you up to the situation that you're going to learn how to communicate with someone when you don't want to communicate with somebody about a situation that you don't want to communicate about. But that's because of, the sheer necessity, because, you have a family unit, you have a household, and you have a responsibility to uphold. And that's just that comes alongside with you can't take the good with the bad here. Um, but that's good, alhamdulillah. Some of the other topics that we were discussing about was about open communications, expectations. Um, what were some of the other? Forgive me, brother Rashid. What were some of the other topics that you would
Oh,
brought up?
okay. Well, I had communication, trust, children, money. Those are like four problem areas that I can think about, and there may be others.
So I'll circle the camel back around to the money issue, and just to give my little 2 cents, I guess, since we're talking about money.
Absolutely.
So I think we had an agreement that we weren't going to let money be an issue that would cause a rift between us. And so far, so good, we've been able to do that. But me personally, I've never been overly fixated on money. But I've always wanted to be able to take care of myself, and now, of course, take care of my family as well. Um, so so we had that agreement, I guess, and so we've been, and that changes because when we were newlyweds, money was no real thing. It was just a tool. Mm-hmm. So we spent, we went on trips or whatever, and we did what we want to do. And then, of course, when kids come along, or you start planning a family or a house, buy a house, then things get different. And so so I guess what I'm really saying is that even with all these issues, it's about communication, about trust, and it's about being a partner with your partner, right? It's a partnership. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are obligations upon the man and the woman Islamically, but even generally speaking, I mean, even I knew going in, I was going to have to share my money with my wife and pay bills and do this, that, and thing, because that's just that's just the natural way it goes. It can't be mine and yours, and we have all the separateness, but we're trying to be together because I don't know how that works out. If I have mine, you have yours, then how are we having ours? Even though the joke before that, even before knowing all the obligations, my wife used to joke with me that her money was her money and my money was her money, and that's still. I mean, she's not a Muslim, and that's just the way it's been ever since we got together. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, when we got married, I didn't know that was like her right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's truth to that. Yeah.
So it worked out for me. it worked out for me that way anyway. So it's like, so my thing is communication. I mean, I think the biggest thing you gotta know your partner as best you can, and then marriage is not just going to be static. It goes up and down. There's all sorts of obstacles. No day, every day is different. Every year is different. There's ups, there's downs, there's lows, there's highs, and you just got to be able to weather those ups and those downs with your partner. And you got, it's with your partner, not just by yourself or herself.
One of the things you just mentioned about you learn something new every day, or there's ups and downs and whatnot with it. It reminds me of one of the most powerful pieces of advice that my mother had given me, which was about her marriage, or in regards about marriage, which was that she was married to my father. I think it was what 40 years, like 40, 45, 46 years. And when she and my father, first year of passing just came a little bit ago. But I remember this piece of advice that my mother had given to me, which was, I'm learning something new about your father every single day, despite us being together for 45 years. And that is a very powerful thing. Like, you
absolutely.
you're and it baffled me. It was like, how does that even happen? Like, you're living, you're growing, and like you're no more than like 20 feet apart inside of the same house, and you're
Right.
sleeping, eating, so on and so forth. But how does that still happen? It's two universes of people that are interacting and working together to build that family unit here. And that's a powerful and a beautiful thing, that there is that, you're still getting to grow and to learn about somebody every single day, even after 45 years of marriage. And I wish that to have that love and that relationship that, with the, I hope everyone gets to experience that. Beautiful.
I mean, and that's when that fluid and security comes in, because, like your brother said, things change. I mean, who you are as an individual in the year 2000 is different than who you are in 2023, 2024. So if you yourself are changing, we should also expect that our spouse is going to change. So we have to be fluid and patient, and leave those doors open of communication, so that we all can walk towards one another and say, hey, what's going on with you? I see something different, something's changing, and on down the line. But being open to that communication is key.
And on that segue, I actually want to bring this back to Brother Abdul Rashid, because he was mentioning about his transition to being stronger now on the Dean. How does that look like inside of your household, or how does that look like for your son and daughters, and how does that interact regarding how does your wife feel about that, and how did you bring that up to them when you wanted to make this further transition to be stronger on the Deen, and to follow core Islam?
Okay, Bismillah. So I think I know I'm not the best communicator, but I know I speak softly but firmly, I guess. So my wife already knew I was a Muslim. Like when I wasn't practicing, she didn't say much. Every now and then she'd probably go to, remind me of something or ask me something or whatever, something would come up, but she never pushed or pulled it one way or the other. But when I decided that this is what I was going to do, she was like, okay. And I was like, so this might require me, getting up early in the morning to pray. I have enough room in my house, so I don't have to do it in the bedroom and wake her up, so I can go downstairs, mashallah. So she'd already seen me practicing at one point, and then she seen me not practicing. So seeing me go back to practice, I guess, really was no big deal. It was nothing new to her. I guess and I'm pretty sure she probably assumed it was going to happen eventually again, just by nature. Now, as far as my kids, well, I didn't have an open discussion with them because they don't have no say in what I do in my life. But but when I would pray at home, I would tell them, this is what I have to do. I'm a Muslim. My son was a few years ago, so he was like, oh yeah, so we're Muslim. I said, well, I know about we're Muslim, but yes, technically you are Muslim too. And they would ask me about it, and I would try to tell him more because he was older. My two girls were much smaller at the time, and they just been watching, being observant, I hope. And so he would ask me questions more or less about why you do this and why you pray 5 times. And I tell him, that's what we do. We pray 5 times a day. And that's what I have to do. And then I think the first time I fasted, he was like, "What do you mean? So you're not gonna eat at all?" I was like, "Well, during the day I'm not gonna eat, and then at night I'm gonna eat." And it was like they saw that, and then they just watched and observed. I guess that like so. I think I took them a few years ago to an Eid celebration. They were like, "Oh, we want to go." I asked them. I didn't tell them they had to go. I asked them if they wanted to go, and it was actually a day they had off from school. I don't know how that worked out. I don't remember. But anyway, so it's, oh yeah, great, let's go. And they was like, well, what's of course, my daughter, the middle one, she was like, well, they're gonna have food. And I was like, yeah, they're gonna have food. She was like, well, what kind of food they're gonna have? And I was like, and of course, the little one was like, are they gonna have cake? I was like, I think they're gonna have some cake. And of course, I didn't know at the time. I said, I think they're gonna have cake, and I know they're gonna have some sort of rice because I haven't been to an Eid celebration or iftar. They didn't have rice anyway. So they was like, yeah, we wanted to go. I was like, well, so let's go. And of course, they observed. They met the brothers and sisters who I was affiliated with, and now my middle one, she goes to me on more. She has gone with me to more Islamic events than the other two. My son has gone to a few too, but he's a boy. He's a teenager. He's just gonna sit in the corner with his headphones on, and he don't pay attention. So I think they're supportive, and and so if not daily, mostly daily, I think about that ayat in the Quran where Allah says, "Save yourself and your family from the fire." Right. So it's very heavy ayat right there, and so sometimes I think I overthink it and I stress myself, and then sometimes I underthink it and I'm like, just trying to save myself, forget about them, right? But so I'm trying. So every day I think about that. I'm trying to I say to myself, what am I doing to help them, help myself, help them? And of course, I can't force them because they're all pretty much, teenagers and they can make their own way. And of course, I think I beat myself up sometimes. I'm like, yeah, I should have did this. I should this. Should have. And I have to realize, what, Allah knows best. And they're a test. This is a test for me, a test for them. And I can't worry. I can't cry over spilt milk. What's done is done, and I can only try to do better, right? And that's my thing. I try to remind myself that every day to try to do better. And like the prophet, he couldn't lead his uncle to Islam, so I can't cry and beat myself up if I'm unsuccessful at leading my family to Islam, because Islam is there for everybody. They just need to take that step towards it. And so I'm trying to nudge, push, whatever. And if it happens, it happens. Alhamdulillah. If it doesn't, alhamdulillah, Allah knows best. I hope that answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were mentioning, crying over spilled milk, or basically, one of the things that we don't want to get ourselves caught up on, and especially regarding whether it's marriages or family related, is that we're gonna fall short. We're going to make mistakes, or we're going to be accountable for things that oh, I didn't know I was accountable for that, or I didn't know I was making this mistake beforehand, or it's uh we don't want to hear from someone else. It's hard to take criticism from somebody else, but in the same case, like any other thing inside of a marriage or inside of a family unit, you have to keep strong, you have to keep going, and you have to take the good with the bad, and you can't dwell on past mistakes. Otherwise, it's like anything, it'll ruin somebody. It'll completely fill one's head with worry, as opposed to looking towards the future of what can I do to make this situation better. And in that situation where now that you are practicing on your gene, now you're being an example for your kids, that is the best thing that you can do going forward, to make sure that they are invited to, or at least feel connected, or drawn into the concept of Islam. And that's the best thing that you can possibly do. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you and your family to
Ameen.
to be shared with that light, and to accept the path of Islam. I mean, about you, brother Rashid, regarding your family situation, or becoming stronger on the deen, because as you had mentioned, there was a transition of you then becoming stronger on the faith. How did your family, or your son, eventually take that transition as you were becoming stronger on the deen? If you'd like to share regarding that
Alhamdulillah.
topic.
Yeah, inshallah. My sons don't ever really remember a day when I wasn't Muslim, so they've always grown up in that. However, what was a little different is that their mom was not Muslim.
Mm,
So they grew up in they had a non-Muslim home with their mom, but when they were with me, I would try to take them to Salat and to Juma and Eid as much as humanly possible. So that had to be a little bit confusing for them, just because I grew up in that kind of environment as well. My mom was Christian and my dad would take me to the masjid. So, I grew up in that environment. So I kind of knew what they were dealing with. So I know it had to be a little bit confusing for them about, what's really going on here. But I think as parents, like a brother Abdul Rashid said, we just have to show them as best as we can, right? We lead by example. We take them to different events. We practice around the home. We show good character and we do the deen as much as possible and explain to them different situations and hopefully they pick up on it. And Allah makes Muslims and we don't. And it took me a minute to really understand that because I was like, all my children have to be Muslim and there's just a lot of pressure that I will put on myself in terms of that happening because I do want to save myself and my family from the hellfire. That's like number one. That's what we're here for. So the stress of my children not becoming Muslim was real prevalent. But once I learned that Allah makes Muslims and not me, now that
mm,
they're all in their late 20s, my oldest being 30 and the other two younger than that, I had to let it go and just realize that's on them. Either they'll take shahada or they won't. But I knew that I wanted to feel that if I die today, that I can stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say I tried my best. I gave him my all. Yeah, I taught him everything that I could. I wasn't lackadaisical in showing them or teaching them anything. Um, and on the day of judgment, everybody's going to be standing on their own, looking at themselves, and you can't save anyone, and no one can save you. But yeah, I do want all my children to be Muslim, but at the end of the day, I can't. I had to ease up that pressure, but teach them as best as I possibly could, even as I was growing, or even falling short as a Muslim, because certainly we fall every single day, and that happens a lot.
And one of the harrowing realities is that, as much as if we live inside of a Muslim family or a, practicing Muslim family, mother and father, as, in my example, so, my wife and I are openly practicing Muslim. Wife is openly wearing hijab. Is that the right term of saying it? We hope that we are
Yeah.
instilling these Islamic qualities onto our children, and they're going to see that. And we invite them to, the Eid and going, to Juma every Friday, the whole 9 yards. Um, we wish we could, we make dua that inshallah we'll be reading more Quran,
Inshallah.
putting that example
Inshallah.
too.
Inshallah.
Um, but there's no guarantee that they will follow that footpath that we're making for them, and especially inside of this, inside of America, modern America, we're not a very, popularized religion. There is still Islamophobia. There is still, this concept that it's a foreign religion, and sometimes there's negative connotations that exist with that, and maybe, and I worry for my kids in my family that that may draw them away from that, and not only that, but there's also so much outside pressure that's coming from the Christmas season, the Easter season, all these pseudo like Christian holidays and whatnot, if you want to consider them that, all that outside influence is coming onto them, that they see the lights, they see the presence, they see the glitz and the glamour and whatnot. That even though I have been able to separate myself from that and say, you know, Christmas in Christ, or even the celebration of this is not the proper way of how I, as a Muslim, want to do that. May not be, it may not sink into their heart the same exact way. And it's always, it's a fear that I have too. Again, that I want my family to follow these Islamic traditions, but at the end of the day, they're going to have to make a decision for themselves. But it's something that keeps me up at night here. So it's not even in a Muslim family, we're still worrying about a full-fledged Muslim family, all from every angle here. There's still that concern, that worry, and even more so, that uh, grandparents or the outside influence from my family too is sometimes also that concern, because there's always that topic too, because being inside of either a mixed cultural uh, family, there's traditions or different understandings or the usuals that go on. Like, for an example, my mother is still interested. I still want to get the family together for like Christmas dinners and Thanksgiving and Fourth of July and Easter and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And even though I'm comfortable and set in my Muslim ways, how am I able to again appease that in the family unit? So that as in a marriage, I'm not inviting my wife into something that she's like, no, no, I don't want anything, any sort of part of that, but
Mm.
also, holding to wanting to keep those ties of kinship with my mother, or with my parents. So maybe that's another topic that we can
Yeah.
discuss
Definitely,
in
definitely,
another
definitely.
episode here, because we are running out of time here. So with that here, let's bring it back to Abdul Rashid for our dessert round.
All right.
Any last words of wisdom that you'd like to impart before we go ahead and close? Bismillah, Abdul Rashid.
Bismillah. Absolutely. So, fudge brownies with the
MashaAllah.
with the walnuts inside. I love those. Um,
Okay.
uh,
Good.
so my parting words of advice are, as my brothers, young brothers, know your religion, know your deen, um, so you know what you're getting into. And if you're a brother who, like myself, who's going to marry a non-Christian woman, non-Muslim woman,
Yeah.
know that know that there are going to come issues with that, and you need to discuss that fully, and continuously talk about it, because it's going to change from day to day, from time to time. And obviously, when it's just you practicing by yourself, it's one thing, but when kids are involved, it's a whole different issue. So know your dean and know your partner. And the biggest thing that we all talked about, it's a partnership, so it's something that has to be worked on between the two of you. And I guess the biggest thing is communication. And I know Brother Rashid's going to probably talk about that as well. But communication, expectations, all that stuff. You got to be mindful of all that. And then may Allah will make it easy for all of us.
Shalom, Tyler. Me.
And Brother Rashid, now to you. What do you bring into the dessert table?
Okay, I'm gonna bring my some bean pie. I'm gonna go with what I brought to the
MashaAllah.
last meal. Alhamdulillah, I went off with it pretty well. So I'm gonna do some bean pie and espresso, some bean pie and espresso, so we can stay awake
MashaAllah.
a little bit when we're done eating. Inshallah
Absolutely.
ta'ala. But yeah, as Brother Abdul Rashid sort of hinted for me, communication, because yeah, that's my intention, is to really jump on that, because things happen, we change throughout life. So have a strong level of communications with the third party, with your wali, before you get married, so that you can talk about the different items that are on your checklist, and maybe even develop a checklist as an individual, and meet with your wali or your guardian before marriage, so that you can try to talk about everything. But it's impossible to talk about everything, because we as human beings change. So have that communication later on down the line, and don't be afraid to have that communication, that hard communication with your spouse, and as a spouse, be able to receive that communication. And obviously, we want to communicate in a soft and nice way. So make sure that that's there. And the big thing, I think, is comes down to money. Really, I really think a lot of issues comes down to that for certain people, not everyone, but for certain people. So just be ready to handle things differently, because your spouse may have grown up a certain way and do things differently. So we have to be open. We have to be open to that, and Allah knows best.
Alhamdulillah. Great piece of advice, and mashallah, great piece of pie. Mashallah. Always love that bean pie.
Alhamdulillah.
So for me, I'll do some lemon bars, mashallah. Keep it sweet, a good sweet treat here. I wanted to mention a hadith that always, whenever and hopefully I don't pay for this later, but whenever there's a case of my wife and I, and we're at a disagreement, there's always a hadith that gets mentioned in the back of my mind here, and this one here, which is narrated by Abu Huraira, radiallahu anhu, that Allah's apostle sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that treat women nicely, for a woman is created from a rib, and the most curved portion of the rib is the upper portion. So if you should try to straighten it, it will break. But if you leave it as it is, it will remain crooked. So treat women nicely. And that's not to be, I don't try to imply it too much in regards to saying like, oh, we're, the women in any sort of case is absolutely crooked and whatnot, and it's our job to straighten them out. No, it's just a matter of that all of us in one way or another, we are human beings. We are limited. If we're so committed to think that someone is going to be our a knight in shining armor, or to be that princess in a tower, no one's going to fit as much as the person that I'm with fits the description of everything I could ever ask for in a wife. It's not a race in perfection or a check boxes of what we're looking for in another person, but sometimes it's how two people can work together to make a cohesive and a successful family unit. It's two people that never stop giving up on one another with the help of Allah to make things work. And in that essence, I'm hoping that in despite of one person's shortcomings, that I can gain strength, or when I have shortcomings, that person can get strength, and hopefully that again in that perfect imbalance, if you will lead to a lot of success. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all successful instead of our marriages, so that they are long lasting, they're strong, they're successful, that we look forward to seeing each other inside of the Jannah. Ameen. And for those to make the dua as well for anybody who is interested in getting married, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you the spouses which are the coolness of your eyes, and a family that will be the joy of one's heart, and the progeny that will make the dua for you as a sadaqah jariyah after your passing. I hope everyone gets that beautiful aspect of this life, so that they'll be able to enjoy and their comradeship inside of the next one. But with that, we'll go ahead and close. Jazakallah khairan again, brothers, for joining me in for this wonderful episode. Always great to see you both again, and we'll see each other soon.
Good meal.
Sure.
Good. All right.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
So Allahumma subhanahu wa bihamdi ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Meat and Potatoes is a podcast by Embrace. Embrace is a comprehensive convert care and empowerment organization dedicated to providing Muslim converts with social and educational spaces that encourage growth, shape their Islamic identity, and equip them with the tools they need for their lifetime journey. To learn more, visit us at www.embracereverts.org.